Hey, what is going on, Guardians? TBL here, back of course to cover this week's issue of This Week at Bungie for the week of February 15th, 2018. It's been a pretty busy week, what with Crimson Days, which I would call mostly a success for the Guardians who are still out there and still playing D2. It's been a pretty decent overall event. But we're going to be going over the blog update for this week and all of the news that's going to be contained therein. As usual, this is going to be brought to us by Cosmo, one of our favorite community managers out there. And here's what he had to say. This week at Bungie, we invited you to celebrate Crimson Days with us. The decorations are up, the rewards are flowing, and teams of two are waging battle in the Crucible. And then he goes on to talk a bit about when the event is going to be ending, of course, next Tuesday on February 20th. But after that, well, when one celebration ends, another begins. Next week, we're going to be having the return of Faction Rally, and this is what they have to say. Faction Rallies are returning next week. The event kicks off at 9 a.m. Pacific Time on February 20th. This time, you can knock out lost sectors as fast as you can kill the bosses, with no timers to hold you back. Start thinking about which faction deserves your loyalty. New Monarchy has won the last two rallies. Can they three-peat? Showing that yes, Faction Rally is coming back, and it feels like it just went away, but this is actually pretty good. I prefer it when there's something to do every single week in Destiny, where they have these kinds of events going back to back to back. Something I made a point of a while back was that I hope we get to the point where like every week there's something special going on in Destiny. One week we can have Iron Banner, the next week we can have Faction Rallies, the next week we can have something after that. I don't know, maybe something like Sparrow Racing League. Please bring that back. So I'm happy to see that Faction Rallies are coming back, especially with the change to lost sectors. They've gotten rid of that timer system. It looks like they managed to work out the way instances work, so you can go and farm those lost sectors as fast as you can kill those bosses with no timers to hold you back. Definitely a good change. And then of course we get a look at the armor for the New Monarchy, the Future War Cult, and of course the Dead Orbit. Who's gonna take the win this time around? Anybody but Dead Orbit is probably what I would have to say. But what are we going to be getting this time? What's going to be the rewards? Well, if this is your first faction rally, here's what you need to know. First, visit the tower and pledge your loyalty to one of the factions. Then, it's time to set out into the wild to complete various activities. Once you've earned enough tokens to qualify for a reward, exchange them for packages full of loot. And there will be some new weapons added to the packages for this event. Here's what we're adding to the reward pool. Then from the pictures there, it looks like we're getting ourselves a Dead Orbit Linear Fusion Rifle, a Future War Cult Energy Hand Cannon, and a Suros-styled New Monarchy Scout Rifle. Additionally, the 3 Victory Reward Auto Rifles from the last Faction Rally are also going to be added to that loot pool. So the Auto Rifle for Future War Cult, New Monarchy, and Dead Orbit are going to be in the overall loot pool this time around. So you should be able to get those new weapons from the engrams. And thank goodness they got ahead of that horse and went ahead and mentioned that, because that was kind of a head scratcher in the previous Faction Rally. Anyways, they continued on by saying, that's not all that is at stake. At the end of the event, the faction with the most packages redeemed will offer their prized weapon as a reward. Those who are loyal to the winner get a big discount and can pick it up for 1,000 Glimmer. Everyone else can still get it at 50,000. Here is what the factions have to offer in the event that they are victorious. For New Monarchy, it looks like you're going to be able to get your hands on the Legal Action 2 Pulse Rifle. For Dead Orbit, it looks like we're getting the 3 Graves Pulse Rifle. And finally, in kind of a bit of a swerve, if Future War Cult manages to win, you'll be able to get your hands on the Dream Legendary Scout Rifle. So definitely an interesting batch of rewards. I'm really interested in seeing what the Scout Rifle for the Future War Cult is going to look like. I do believe it's a high-impact frame scout. So based on the perks that are on it, it could definitely be a winner in the future. But anyways, these 3 factions will face off again, and their fates are directly tied to your choices. Will Future War Cult finally win the day? And it kind of seems to me like they really want them to with that scout being on sale. But that's it for the news when it comes to Faction Rally. After that, we get to hear a little bit more about that good stuff, the Sandbox update changes. Here's what they have to say. A few weeks ago, Josh Hamrick stopped by to give us an update on Sandbox changes. He mentioned that his visit was the first of many from the Sandbox team and that this meal will span many courses. It's time for the next course. Senior designer John Wisniewski is visiting us from the kitchen with an update on the exotic tuning pass our team is working on diligently to make exotics more exoticer. And before we even start this, hallelujah, this is something we kind of needed to hear about. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and see what John has to say. Hello players, I'm here to talk to you about the work going into the exotic tuning pass on the Destiny 2 roadmap. When Destiny first launched, we built, play-tested, and shipped a batch of exotic weapons that we hoped would be worthy of your time and hype. Shortly after release, we were happily inundated with a mountain of player feedback. This allowed us to check our assumptions, do some tuning, and push out one of the first Destiny sandbox updates which were solely focused on exotic weapons. We're doing this again with Destiny 2, and this time we're including exotic weapons and armor. Now, here's some gameplay goals for this pass. Tuning pass on exotic gear focused on adding and/or increasing player power spikes, with a focus on low usage items, but all items are being considered. And finally, they want to lean into an item's established gameplay and push it harder, avoiding catch-all improvements that dilute the item's identity. So, how does this play out? We can look at Graviton Lance for an example. The functional concept is a weapon that fires 2 cosmic void rounds that create a 0 air resistance tunnel for a high caliber precision shot to fire through. The first 2 rounds have almost no recoil and prime the air, and the third round does high damage with no falloff. A kill knocks the body back with considerable force, it tumbles, and then explodes. Now, resounding player feedback has been along the lines of, looks great, sounds great, neat explosion. I can't get kills in PvP because all the damage is at the end of the burst. It kicks too hard for the follow-up, and I can't reliably damage targets with the death explosion in any activity because the body goes flying too far backwards. I would actually say that, yeah, that's pretty accurate for how I feel about the Graviton Lance. Well, all spectacle, but not enough utility. To target the first pain point, we reduced the recoil of the burst, added some aim assist, and changed it from 3 rounds to 2. This still plays into the fantasy of a low damage gravity neutralizing round forming a projectile tunnel for the last bullet. It also allows us to ensure the damage per burst is at a competitive level for PvP engagements. In fact, it gives Graviton a slight mathematical edge against other pulse rifles. On the second feedback item, we did some tuning to the ragdoll body. We made it so that rather than violently flying backwards and likely out of range of a potential splash damage opportunity, the defeated opponent floats back and then up. Then, we made the explosion bigger, increased the damage, and added some void field projectiles that seek out any remaining targets. This is one of the more exaggerated examples to help describe how we're looking at our goals and applying them to the gear. At the time of this writing, the weapons that are not getting an update are Merciless, Telesto, Wardcliff Coil, Mida Multitool, Colony, the Legend of Acreus, and the Vigilance Wing. Some of the above perform well without needing changes, while others, like the Vigilance Wing Pulse Rifle, are already benefiting from the tuning changes planned for Update 1.1.4. Everything else has had some degree of power or utility increase, whether it's simply bumping a stat or some deeper plumbing as described above. And if I can just stop right there, this is the John Wisniewski I want to hear from. Basically, he pointed out some of the best performing exotics in the game, like Merciless, like Wardcliff Coil, Mida Multitool, the Legend of Acreus, and went out of his way to say, we're not touching those at all. We're not going to be nerfing those in the classic Bungie style. To bring them more in line with other things, we're taking the other underperforming exotics and we're bringing them up a stage to match the best performing weapons in the game. And when it comes to the Graviton Lance, I like that. I like that it's going to be basically dealing a little bit more damage per shot. It's basically going to have less recoil. It's going to be more reliable, and you're hopefully actually going to be able to use that thing in PvP. This all sounds good thus far. But continuing on, he says, we'll be touching a lot of powerful gear with this update, and to truly understand the impact for players requires a lot of design iteration and test time. It isn't enough to crank up the damage and run one Striker Crucible match with a gun and helmet and move on. Dialing in the right amount of power, testing in all activities with all types of loadouts, finding the bugs, fixing the bugs, updating the perk description text to reflect new behavior, and handing that off to localization for translation, it's a ton of work. But we're up to it. We sincerely appreciate your patience. I believe it will be worth the wait. We'll be back soon to talk about exotic masterworks as well. Until then, continue being excellent to each other. And I really wanted to improve that last section there because right now I've definitely been somebody crying that sandbox changes. We need to hear about sandbox changes. We need sandbox changes implemented right now. But I thought it was really important that they note, hey, these things aren't instant. It takes a long time to test these changes, even the more minute fine-tuned things that can have all kinds of effects, and it's a lot more complicated than just saying, all right, let's bump up, range on pulse rifles by 20%. Go run a strike. Did it feel good? Yeah, well, good. Let's bring it back. That's enough. No more testing. And I thought it was really, I really appreciate that he kind of went out of his way to say, yeah, we're working on these things, and it takes a little bit of time. For me personally, as long as they're talking about these changes, these sandbox changes specifically, as long as they're sharing what they're doing and letting us know what they're working towards, that's good enough for me. That's enough for me to know, hey, all right, when this finally comes into effect, it might be worth my time to check out. But all right, Guardians, that's pretty much it for the biggest bits of news in this week's This Week at Bungie. And overall, there's a lot in here to digest, and I'm very happy to hear about some of the exotic changes coming forward. Even more so than like the buff that they talked about for the Graviton Lance, I'm more so psyched to hear that they're not going to be messing with like Legend of Acreus or the Wardcliff Coil or the Merciless at all. That's what I really believe is really important when it comes to exotic balance moving forward. Make everything as good as the Mida. Make everything as good as the Legend. Make everything as good as the Merciless, rather than bringing those things down in a constant state of power dip, like I believe happened with Destiny 1. But alright, Guardians, that is it. Be sure to let us know what you all think of these changes down in the comment section below. Are you playing Crimson Doubles? Having fun with it? Are you going to come back next week for Faction Rally? Be sure to let us know. And if you enjoyed this, feel free to drop a like and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date with all of the latest Destiny 2 news. But I'm out for now. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I am TheBlackLink. You Guardians, stay frosty.